The question in the dark. The desert at night doesn't feel empty. It feels like it's watching. Caleb Rourke had ridden these miles so many times he could have done it blind. Past the dry creek bed, around the broken windmill, through the corridor of mesquite that clawed at your sleeves like old regrets. But tonight, his horse kept tossing its head, snorting like it smelled lightning. Caleb slowed anyway. He'd learned a long time ago that fear in a good animal wasn't weakness. It was warning. The moon was sharp and white, hanging like a coin over the horizon. A cold wind dragged sand across the trail in thin, whispering sheets. Caleb's hand stayed low near his saddle horn. Not dramatic, just ready. That's when he saw her. A silhouette at first. A lone figure standing beside the road marker, like she'd risen from the sand itself. A woman, coat too thin for the cold, hair loose, blown back by the wind. She didn't wave, didn't plead. She just waited. Caleb's throat went dry. People didn't wait out here at night, unless they were desperate or dangerous. He brought the horse to a stop a few feet away, keeping space. His eyes tried to find a weapon, a knife glint, anything. But what he saw instead was bruising on her face. Purple shadows under one eye, a split lip that had crusted into a dark line. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them visible like she'd learned the rules of survival the hard way. Caleb swallowed. You lost. The woman's gaze lifted to him. Not wide, not begging. Steady, like she'd already cried all the tears she had, and decided pain wasn't allowed to win the rest of the night. No, she said. I left. Caleb's heart knocked once, hard. People didn't just leave out here. Not without a story trailing behind them like blood in sand. What's your name? He asked. She studied him like he was a door that could either lead to freedom or straight back into hell. Lena Hart, she said. And you're Caleb Rourke. He stiffened. I don't know you. You don't have to, she replied softly. Your name's the only one folks say out here without laughing. The wind lifted, colder. Caleb's horse shifted, uneasy. Caleb kept his voice calm. Why are you on this trail at midnight, Lena Hart? Lena took one step closer. Not threatening, just committed. Then she said it. Cowboy, do you fear me or desire me? She asked, alone in the desert night. Caleb blinked, thrown so hard he almost laughed, except her voice wasn't playful. It was cracked at the edges, like the question was a shield she'd forged out of humiliation. Neither, Caleb said, careful. I don't even know what you mean. Lena's eyes glimmered in moonlight. You will. Caleb's spine tightened. Tell me what happened to your face. Lena's jaw worked. For a moment she looked away toward the dark highway, as if expecting headlights to appear like judgment. Then she looked back. You ever hear of Bishop Kane? Caleb's stomach turned before his mind could catch up. Bishop Kane, ranch owner, county donor, church builder, the kind of man who shook hands with politicians and made people feel grateful just for breathing near his boots. Caleb answered slowly. I've heard. He owns half the county, Lena said, and he believes he owns the other half too, including women who don't have power. Caleb's eyes narrowed. What's Bishop Kane to you? Lena laughed once, bitter. He was my ticket out of poverty. That's what my aunt said. He's old, but he's generous. He'll give you a roof and a name. She said it like it was a blessing. Caleb's voice dropped. And I believed her, Lena whispered, because when you slept in cars and watched your mom apologize for being hungry, you start thinking you don't deserve choices. Caleb felt anger flare, hot enough to burn through the cold. So you married him. Lena nodded once. 2 months ago. Caleb watched her closely. And tonight you ran. Tonight, Lena said, I found out what kind of man he really is. Caleb's hand clenched on the reins. You didn't know? Lena's eyes flashed. I knew he was cruel in quiet ways. The kind that doesn't leave marks where people can see. But tonight, she swallowed. Tonight, he brought men to the house. His friends. He called it a celebration. Caleb's blood went ice cold. Lena, she lifted her chin, forcing the words out like pulling thorns from skin. He tried to give me to them like I was property. Caleb's breath left him in one sharp exhale. The desert seemed to go silent, as if even the wind wanted to hear what came next. And when I refused, Lena continued, voice trembling but not breaking, he smiled. Like he expected it, like he'd planned for it. And he said, "You're going to learn obedience, girl. One way or another." Caleb saw the bruise again. Not just damage. Evidence. Proof. "You got away," he said. "I ran barefoot through broken gravel," Lena answered. "I climbed a fence and tore my hands open. I hid under a water trough while they searched property with flashlights like it was a game." Caleb's jaw tightened so hard it hurt. "Why come to me?" Lena's voice turned low, deadly serious. "Because you're the only man in this county who walked away from Bishop Kane and didn't crawl back." Caleb froze. That was old history. A scar he didn't show. A job he'd quit when he found out Kane was buying land with threats and signatures from drunk men who didn't know what they'd sold. Caleb had refused to be part of it. Kane had smiled then, too, like he was amused by rebellion. Caleb swallowed, staring at Lena. "If he finds you with me, he'll ruin you," Lena finished. "He'll call you a thief, a predator. He'll say you lured me. He'll say I'm crazy. He'll say anything to keep his image clean." Caleb stared into the dark, imagining the sheriff's handshake with Kane, the pastor's praise, the county judge's smile. "And people will believe him," Caleb said quietly. "Yes," Lena replied. "That's why I'm standing here asking you the only question that matters." She stepped closer until moonlight caught the trembling determination in her eyes. "Cowboy," she whispered again, "do you fear me or do you desire me?" Caleb took a slow breath, then leaned forward slightly in the saddle, voice rough with truth. "I fear what they'll do to you," he said, "and I desire one thing, justice." Lena's shoulders sagged like those words were the first warm blanket she'd felt in years. Then, far down the road, a pair of headlights flickered into view. Lena flinched violently. "They found me." Caleb's heart slammed. The lights were moving fast. Too fast for a drunk driver, too steady for a traveler. And then Caleb saw the second set of lights behind them. A convoy. He turned his horse slightly, scanning the desert for an escape route, but the wind had shifted again, carrying something that made his blood run colder than the night. The faint bark of dogs. Lena grabbed the edge of Caleb's saddle with both hands, voice shaking. "If they take me back, I won't survive it." Caleb looked down at her, then at the approaching headlights, and felt the old, dangerous part of himself wake up. The part that had sworn never to fight Kane because fighting him meant losing everything. But Lena was already losing everything. Caleb leaned down and caught her wrist. "Get on." Lena's eyes widened. "What?" "Now," he snapped softly. "If you're coming with me, you ride." The lights grew brighter. The dogs barked louder. Lena tried to climb, clumsy with fear and exhaustion, and Caleb hauled her up behind him, her hands clutching his coat like he was the last solid thing in the world. The first truck's headlights slammed across the desert like a spotlight, and from inside the darkness behind those lights, a voice rang out, deep, confident, smiling. "Caleb Rourke, Bishop Kane called. You always did have a weakness for lost things." Caleb's entire body went rigid, because Kane wasn't alone. The sheriff's cruiser rolled right behind him, its emblem catching moonlight like a badge made of betrayal. And Caleb knew, in one sickening instant, that this wasn't just a rescue search. It was a trap, the price of shelter. The horse lunged forward before the echo of Bishop Kane's voice faded. Sand exploded under its hooves as Caleb drove it off the trail, cutting hard toward the arroyo where the land dipped and twisted like a wound that never healed. "Hold on," Caleb said, not loudly, but with the kind of certainty that didn't invite argument. Lena wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face into his back as the wind tore tears from her eyes. The headlights behind them scattered, trucks fanning out, engines roaring like predators released from a leash. "Sheriff's with him." Lena choked. "That means—" "I know what it means," Caleb replied. His jaw was set so tight it ached. "Means the law's already been bought." A rifle cracked in the distance. Not aimed to kill. A warning shot. Kane liked theater. The horse leapt the edge of the arroyo, sliding down loose rock into darkness. Lena screamed once, then bit it back as they hit hard and kept moving, hooves striking damp earth where an old storm had once passed. Caleb rode blind for nearly a mile, heart-hammering, until the land rose again and the truck's engines faded into frustrated echoes. Only then did he slow. Lena slid off the horse on shaking legs. Her knees buckled, and Caleb caught her before she hit the ground. "You're safe," he said, though he didn't fully believe it himself. She laughed weakly. "You don't sound convinced." "I'm not," Caleb admitted, "but you're alive. That counts." They reached his cabin just before dawn, an old place tucked against the rocks, invisible unless you knew where to look. Caleb barred the door, checked the windows, then finally turned to face her in the pale morning light. Without moon and shadows, the bruises were worse. Finger marks on her arm, a healing cut at her hairline. Caleb exhaled slowly. He did this. "Yes, you could go to the state police." Lena shook her head. "Kane funds half their programs. He'll say I ran off with you. He'll say you wanted me, that I tempted him." Caleb felt anger coiled tight in his chest. "And people will believe him." "They always do," she said softly, "because he looks like a savior." Silence stretched between them. "Why'd you really ask me that question?" Caleb finally said, "Fear or desire?" Lena met his eyes. "Because men like him only understand ownership. I needed to know if you'd see me as a person or a problem." Caleb looked away. "I'm not a hero, Lena." She nodded. "Neither am I. I just refuse to disappear." A knock hit the door like a gunshot. Both of them froze. Caleb reached for his rifle, heart pounding. Another knock, slow, confident. "Caleb." Bishop Kane's voice called through the wood, smooth as oil. "We're just worried about my wife." Lena's breath hitched. "He found us." Caleb stepped between her and the door. "This is where the story changes," he murmured. And outside, Kane smiled, already certain he'd won. The story they tried to bury. Caleb opened the door just enough to see Kane clearly. The man looked immaculate. Clean boots, crisp jacket, the face of a man who'd never been told no and never believed he could be wrong. "Caleb," Kane said warmly, "I appreciate you keeping my bride safe. She's emotional." Lena stepped forward before Caleb could stop her. "Don't call me that." Kane's smile flickered. "Lena, sweetheart, come home. You embarrass yourself." Caleb's voice cut in. "She's not going anywhere." Kane turned his gaze on him, amused. "You always had a streak of drama. This doesn't end well for you." Within hours, the story was everywhere. By noon, people whispered that Lena had seduced Caleb. By evening, the sheriff had a warrant for Caleb's arrest. Kane moved fast. He always did. Caleb was taken in without resistance. He knew fighting now would only feed the lie. Lena watched him go, terror clawing her chest. "This is my fault," she whispered. Caleb shook his head through the bars. "No, this is his." Days passed like years. Lena hid, shaking, until an old woman found her in a church basement, a retired teacher named Mrs. Alvarez. "You're not crazy," the woman said firmly. "I've seen him break girls like you before." Lena's voice trembled. Why didn't anyone stop him? Mrs. Alvarez's eyes hardened. Because fear is quieter than truth. Together, they started digging. A ledger, old hospital records, women who'd moved away, a nurse who remembered bruises, a ranch hand who'd seen too much. Lena recorded everything. Then she walked into the courthouse on the day of Caleb's hearing and asked to speak. The judge sighed, irritated. "Make it quick." Lena stood tall, hand shaking but voice steady. "You can jail him. You can silence me. But you can't erase what you did." Gasps rippled through the room as recordings played. Kane's smile cracked for the first time. The room went silent, and the sheriff's face went pale. When power finally cracks, the courtroom no longer felt like a room. It felt like a fault line. Lena stood frozen as the final recording ended, her own voice echoing back at her. Steady, broken, undeniable. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even Bishop Kane seemed stunned, like a man who'd spent his whole life believing gravity didn't apply to him and had just felt the ground shift. Then he laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "This is absurd," Kane snapped, straightening his jacket. Story stitched together by a hysterical girl and a bitter cowboy who's always hated me. Caleb, seated behind the defense table, rose slowly. His wrist still bore faint red marks from the cuffs. "You don't get to call her hysterical," he said quietly. The judge banged the gavel. "Mr. Rourke." "No," Caleb interrupted, voice steady. "You let him talk. You let him control this room. You let him rewrite truth until it fit his wallet. And every woman in here knows it." A murmur rippled through the benches. Then a woman stood. "I was 17, she said, hands trembling. He told me my family would lose their jobs." Another voice followed. "He said I owed him for my rent." Another. "He said no one would believe me." Each word struck Kane like a crack spreading through glass. His face drained of color. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward the exit. The judge called for order, but the room had already tipped. By evening, state investigators arrived, not smiling, not shaking hands. Asking questions Kane couldn't charm away. Caleb was released without ceremony. He stepped outside into the sunlight, blinking like a man waking from a long night. Lena stood there. For a moment, neither spoke. "You didn't run," Caleb said at last. She swallowed. "I was done running." Kane was arrested that night. No speeches, no supporters, just metal cuffs and flashing lights. The sheriff resigned 2 days later, citing health reasons. No one believed him. Justice didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like weight lifting from tired shoulders. Still, when Lena lay awake that night, fear whispered that power always found a way back, that monsters didn't stay caged. And she wondered if telling the truth was enough, or if the hardest part was still ahead, the woman who chose herself. The desert looked different once fear loosened its grip. Months passed. Quiet ones, the kind that heals slowly and honestly. Lena bought a small house near the edge of town, not with charity, not with pity, but with restitution. Money that came with no apologies, just acknowledgement. She painted the walls herself, choosing colors she liked, not ones meant to please. She took a job teaching at the local school. History. Truth felt like the right subject. At first, students stared at her like she was fragile glass. Then one day a girl stayed after class and said, "You didn't lie." Lena nodded, throat tight. "Neither will you." Caleb visited sometimes. Never announced. Never expected. He fixed a fence once. Drank coffee on the porch. Left before dusk if she seemed tired. One evening, as the sun sank low and the desert glowed amber, Lena broke the silence. "Do you ever regret stopping that night?" she asked. Caleb shook his head. "It cost me the version of myself that stayed quiet." She smiled faintly. That version was lonely. He studied her. "You're not afraid anymore." She thought about it. "I am, but fear doesn't drive." They stood side by side, not touching, not needing to. Bishop Kane was sentenced quietly. No crowds, no speeches, just a record that couldn't be erased. People still whispered. Some always would. But Lena had learned something simple and unbreakable. Truth didn't need permission to exist. On the anniversary of the night she ran, Lena returned to the desert road alone. She stood where she'd once shaken and asked a stranger a desperate question. This time, she didn't need to ask anyone anything. She had already chosen herself. Behind her, footsteps approached. Caleb stopped a respectful distance away. "Ready to go?" he asked. Lena looked at the horizon, then back at him. "Yes." They walked away together, not rescued, not owned, not defined by what they'd survived. The desert watched them leave, and for the first time it let them go